Hey guys, I'm Scott Conant, and I am this week's Man of the Hour. You got to tune in. It's a great conversation.
You sound great. You look great. You're in Arizona. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling tan because you walk outside and you you get burned right away.
You
It's
have to be
hot here in
careful.
Arizona.
It's
You got to
if
be
it's
really
too hot,
careful. Yeah.
people are always talking about skin cancer and shit, dude. You're gonna have to put some sunscreen on.
It's that's just part of the daily. It's hot out there. It's hot out there. Thank God for pools.
About to go
Thank
jump
God for
into
air conditioning.
before, yeah,
Air
yeah, yeah, yeah.
conditioning. Yeah.
Before you
My
have to go
God,
get
it's
to the pool,
brutal.
dude. You know what? Thank you for saying yes. Thanks for trusting me with the conversation and the platform to do this with you, man. I was just telling
It's
you,
my pleasure.
people have looked up to you. They love you. Be it a fan or someone who just lands on your Instagram page. I think everybody has something that they can get from Scott Conant, man. So thank you for spending the next about an hour with us. I can never guarantee a fucking hour. Sometimes they're 15 minutes, sometimes they're an hour and a half. I don't care. But we'll see where this one goes, man.
We'll have fun. So let's talk about it. It's all good. It's all good. Thank you.
You know what? So for starters, I think that there's something we see in you that has a level of ownership, has a level of taking responsibility for the things that you've. I mean, you're 4 restaurants in, Scott, and you're about to launch more, right? Not only that, but you have
Yeah.
platforms, you have people asking for your attention, you have people like me, media junkies coming at you. Hey, will you do an interview with us? Right? Will you inspire the world? But it all had to start somewhere. I feel like with you, like,
Yeah.
at the very beginning, can you take us back a little bit as to how big you thought all of this might have been for you?
Well, I had no expectations when I started cooking of anything. What exists now in the restaurant world and with food TV and everything that goes along with it didn't exist in 1985. Um,
Mm,
the restaurants where I grew up there were a lot of chain restaurants. Let me preface it. I'm from Waterbury, Connecticut, which it's not a fancy town, right? There's not a lot of wealth there. It's a very lower middle class place. So I remember when I told my mother that I wanted to be a cook. I went to a vocational school for high school,
oh
and
shit.
you get to choose. You get to choose what you want to be. You could be a carpenter, an auto mechanic, a auto body. You could be a plumber, a carpenter, an electrician. Hairstylist, you name it, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't get into the plumbing program. So as my second choice, I chose culinary arts. And I remember telling my mother when I got into the class that I really liked it. And I started working at a family friend's restaurant. And I remember her looking at me and saying, like, what do you mean? You want to be like, are you going to work at like Friendlies or one of these places when you get older? Like, you're going to flip hamburgers? That's what you're going to do?
Yeah.
And I just thought it was, and obviously I was 15, right? I never thought that far ahead. But I never ruled anything out either. I mean, I thought at the end of my career, maybe if everything worked out, by the time I was in my 50s, I'd be the chef of a restaurant, my own restaurant in New York City. And I could, maybe, be in that kitchen every day, just plugging away and working like that. Yeah,
And
that was a
dreams
long
come
time ago.
true.
That was 35 years ago. Yeah.
Man, 35 years later. You know what? I keep thinking, I'm like, well, our chefs usually, you'll start in the kitchen, but once you've built 4 restaurants, dude, you can't be in 4 places at one time, and you can barely be the chef of all those. So what does that look like for you now?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time kind of more of a coach, I would say, like
Mm,
trying to instill a vision, trying to instill good habits, trying to, mentor people whenever I can, really trying more than anything else, trying to create this vision for a restaurant that we all have to walk in this path, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And just trying to elevate it constantly, rise up, you know, there's that term they say, keep moving forward, keep forging ahead. And one time somebody said to me, if you're just forging ahead, you're still on a parallel line. Isn't the intention
Mm.
to kind of rise up, right? To rise up is a much better analogy. And for me, it creates a better vision for what I want.
Whoa. That there's something there.
That's
You're right.
good, right? Yeah,
That's
it's good. Yeah,
that's
it's
the name
good.
of your that's the
Yeah.
name of your book. Cookbook or autobiography, whatever you want to call it, Scott. That's the name of it. Rise up. That's true. Because think of how many times we tell ourselves, like, oh, just, there's something better on the other side.
Yeah,
There's probably going to be more of this if you just keep trucking along, right? But then you're just going with the motions, don't you think?
that's right. That's right. I mean, the idea and the intention, I would say, is, when something no longer works for you. I mean, I've done this a lot. It's really important to know when to shed it. Like,
Mm,
there's the analogies, you can create millions of them. A snake sheds its skin in order to grow and be bigger. A lobster with the shell, and yada 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 yada. At
right.
the end of the day, I think there's things along the way that we need to kind of take a look at and say, does this
Mhm.
work for me anymore, or does it not?
Wow.
And that's
Yeah.
part of the rising up process.
I love that. Wait, I have to stop you. You said snake and lobster. And I would assume it's because you're a chef. You probably had lobster, right? Unless you're allergic to shellfish. Have you had a snake?
I've eaten snake, sure. I've eaten all kinds of stuff, man. Yeah,
Scott, a
yeah,
snake?
yeah. It was wild. We were doing Chopped one day, and
Yeah.
we were on set, and my wife sent me a picture of a rattlesnake that was at our front door here in Arizona. I was totally freaked out about it, and it just so happened. Oh, somebody's calling me. Sorry
Yeah,
about
no
this.
worries, buddy. No worries.
Sorry. Just getting rid of them. Um, I just it just so happened. Let me get back to you. I apologize. All right, sorry. So she sends me this picture of a rattlesnake, and I'm like, oh my God, that's freaking me out. She called the fire department. They came, they took it away, brought it out to the
Yeah.
desert. But just so happens that day in the basket was rattlesnake as well. So we were eating rattlesnake.
Oh, what does it taste
It was,
like?
yeah. I mean, it's pretty mild. It tastes like, and people say it tastes like chicken, but it,
Okay,
it has a
everybody says
little bit
everything
more of
tastes
an,
like chicken. You could say the
yeah,
same
that's
shit
true.
about like like alligators
But
and stuff.
if you had taken, let's say, if you had taken chicken and just let it sit in salt water with a little vinegar in it, and then dried it out and eat, that's what it tastes like. Almost a little bit of an acidic backdrop of the flavor, not acid. It's hard to explain exactly what it
Mm.
is.
Oh
Yeah,
man, the more you know. The more you know. You said something very
yeah.
valuable, which is in order to rise up, you totally have to realize um, what's not working for you. People don't do enough of that check-in, I don't think. And I think it's because they don't know when to do that check-in. When do you check in with yourself? If you
Yeah.
had to I mean, obviously you're probably not doing this like, oh, every Sunday I go, lay in bed and meditate with my feet up and ask
Yeah.
myself if things are working or not. But if you had to give us a little bit of an idea as to when you do those check-ins to make sure things are working, when is that?
I think they're kind of like mental health checks, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you find yourself complaining about the same thing all the time, you find yourself like, when you have to do something and it's almost an arduous task, that's probably not working for you.
That's a
You
good
know what I
point.
mean? We've
Of
all
course.
we've all been in that situation where you say, okay, I got to do this thing, but when it gets to a point, you're like, oh, I don't want to do this.
Mm,
That's probably a good reason to start to think of an exit strategy,
exit strat,
or
dude.
more
Yeah.
importantly, take a vacation. Like, take a vacation and then make decisions. I always
Yeah.
say you can't make a decision when you're tired. When you're tired and sick of something, allow
Scott, you are
yourself to take that
literally saying
vacation.
everything I think I told my friend before he left on a plane this morning. You
Is
are
that right? Yeah,
so,
good,
I knew you were
good.
smart, but I didn't know we had the same brain. Imagine a life where you would just be able to recognize, like, holy shit, maybe I'm feeling that or I'm thinking that for a reason. But you, like you said, you have to know when you can activate on those thoughts. You can't do it when you're fucking tired.
No, no, no. You can't do it when you're not in the right mental place to do it. And also, you have to think of the repercussions. I mean,
Yeah,
I think a lot of times it's easy to say, well, this doesn't work for me anymore. I'm out. But you have
sure.
responsibilities.
That's
Let's be
exactly right.
honest. We all have responsibilities that you need to, one of the things that I notice these days is a lot of people just say, this doesn't work, I'm gone. And they don't think of the repercussions of that. And there's a lot of repercussions sometimes,
Not
particularly when
just
you have
financial.
responsibilities.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have children, you have, like, whatever it is, we need to set the examples.
Yeah.
And it's important that we act the way we would want people to act towards and with us,
100%.
right?
Especially
Yeah,
when leaving. That's not an easy thing to do. Especially, I mean, listen, you're an entrepreneur at heart, and that's kind of, it's a different world. But I was talking to many
yeah,
friends who are in corporate right now, corporate America, doesn't matter where you work.
yeah,
If you have a boss and you're reporting to somebody, wouldn't you want to leave gracefully, right? Like, for instance, anybody
yeah.
who's in the fucking military, you want to be honorably discharged if you have to leave at that very moment. It
That's
has to be
right.
done in a more honorable way. And I think right now, especially the millennial generation, our audience and anybody listening right now who's in their like late teens, early 20s, late 20s, even early 30s. Shit. I mean, millennials and Gen Zs are known for just picking up and going and saying, fuck you, and then calling it a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That it's a, I get it because it doesn't work, but
Sure.
if something isn't working for you, I get it. You want to make the change, you want to make it immediately. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure. Yeah, I get those things, but this is life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's pressure that we have to deal with, and there's
Yeah.
responsibilities that we have towards, towards ourselves as well, just from a from a humility perspective. Like,
Mm,
it's not all
that's
about our
right.
egos and, we hold ourselves up to these, quote unquote standards. At the end of the day, we all need to be responsible and respectful towards one another.
That's exactly right. I had those two words down too: responsibility and then respect.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it
Yeah.
too. That's all about relationships, right? They used to say it's who you know, and I used to correct people. And no, it's who knows you. What do they say when you walk out of the door?
Yeah.
Biggest thing I took out of college.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's a great point. Great point. I agree.
With
I
relationships though,
agree.
for you, I would imagine, I mean, when you're running for restaurants, it's, I mean, from the person that walks in your doors, right, at a restaurant to buy the food and sit down, to the team that you have, to the investors or whoever's on your side of the house, how important have relationships played in all the success in the 35 years for you?
It's 100% everything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's funny you say that because I always say that we are in the relationship business. That's the business we're in. Yes, we serve food. Yes, we serve people. Yes, there's an environment that we need to create and a culture that we need to create, right?
Yeah.
But it is the 100% the relationship that we create with customers
Sure.
and with our colleagues that really matters, right? And that's the culture that we create, the foundation of everything to build upon after that.
Mm. And then just knowing that there's a legacy being built behind that too. Has that ever made you feel uncomfortable or a little bit unsettled that you knew that you were building somewhat of an empire on your name and these restaurants? And yeah, that's a lot of weight, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think of things like that, right? This isn't about
Good.
my ego, and it's really not. I think about things like we're trying to build something wonderful. We're trying to build
Mm,
something bigger than ourselves. If we really, I think that's the key, right? For the
sure.
buy-in, well, you always got to buy in. I got to buy into my own bullshit, just like everybody else does.
I
So
like how
I
you
need to
call it
be honest with
bullshit.
myself, and I need to be,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, listen. In the end, what matters, right? What matters?
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing matters. Let's be honest, man. Nothing truly matters in the end. All the stresses and the strife and the worries of money and all that stuff, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is we walk out of this with a lot of love. That's the
Hmm.
goal, right?
Mm,
That's truly what we can take with us on the other side of this. So all the other stuff, it's all minutia, right? It's all
yeah.
like mishigas. It doesn't matter.
Michigas.
Yeah,
And it all fills
that's
the ego, which is just a bunch of fluffy shit, I think, right?
it's the ego doesn't pay the bills. The ego, if anything, it holds us back,
Yeah,
right?
it
Because
does.
it tells us things that we can do that may be perfect lies. You
Sure.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm all about getting excited for projects. Somebody just called me the other day for a new project
Yeah.
that I can drop everything and just focus on this one project, right? And get it going and get it motivated and get it honed and
Yeah.
focus on the craft and just get it, it's exciting. It's exciting. And that's I think what matters, right? Like getting the people to be as motivated and as excited as you are about what you're trying to build ultimately.
Mm. I love how
Getting
you
that
turn that.
buy-in.
That's it. I love how you turn it around too, because it is. How many times have we asked people that, like, what gets you excited? It's always inward facing. I think what people's motives could be, whether they know it or not. I
Yeah.
have seen it every single day. It's like me, my, I. You know what I even
Yeah.
do if I ever text or email you back, like over the next so long, I would try to avoid the words I, my, da da da, right? And I try to pay attention. It's weird, but like I did it this just now. I was like, I think I was emailing your publicist, and I tried
Yeah.
not to use the words I and my, and that is, but that's the world we live in too, without people recognizing it
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, I think we grow up with the love of our parents, right? And
yeah.
parents now are different than when I was a kid. I'm much older than you. So when I was a kid, my parents wouldn't like coddle us, right? It was like,
Yeah.
you go outside
Yeah.
and play, come in when it turns dark. Like
Yeah.
that's
Dinner's ready.
parenting back then. Exactly. That was parenting back then. Now my kids, I'm a helicopter dad. Like if I'm home with them, go check the mail. The mailbox is a quarter of a block down the street from me. And I'm like outside looking to make sure they're okay. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's the difference. Like these kids are my children, my daughters are growing up with me and my wife, just looking at them all the time and making sure that they're safe and they're respected and coddled, right? Like
Yep.
almost wrap them in the bubble wrap when they walk out the door to make sure they don't get hurt. And I feel like that has an effect as an adult because they're
Yep.
less prone to independence almost.
Yeah. But
Does that make sense?
Of course
Yeah.
it does. You said something earlier about like stressors and a lot of this not mattering, which is so true. But then how do you avoid stress in those situations? Because they say there's nothing like having kids. Because I heard from somebody it was Andy Grammer actually mentioned like you haven't found your favorite person till you've had your first kid, and he has 2 daughters as well.
True.
And I think that's very valid. I don't plan to have kids for a long time, but I am a child, right?
Yeah.
And then you are too. How do you avoid having stress? I'm just curious, right? Until I have kids, I'm just really curious. How do you avoid stress when you're trying to like make sure your kids are safe?
You're always going to have stress when
Yeah.
you don't really notice. I always say, like, I didn't know what love was until my oldest daughter was born. And
Yeah.
when I saw her for the first time, it was one of those instances where I have known this face
Yeah.
my whole life, but I was meeting her for the first time. And I just remember being so incredibly taken aback and you realize the value of love. And love is completely endless. It is this deep well of infinite love. And that's the difference with love and hate, right?
Sure.
And you could hate something a lot, but it gets to a point where you need to stop the hatred because it will hurt you, right? It'll hurt your psyche, it'll hurt your daily life and all that stuff. But then when my second daughter was born, I realized that I can love something equally and endlessly. And that was wild for me, just absolutely wild. We love people, I love my wife, love my friends, but the love of a child is unlike anything you will ever. Life doesn't prepare you for that love until you experience it yourself.
Man, that's so refreshing to hear. I could kind of like tear up a little bit because it's like we wonder why our parents care for us in certain ways. My mom's a tiger mom. I think I've said that several times on this podcast. Like, I love my mom and my dad. My dad was in the Air Force, so he's a very different style of love. Similar to you and your wife. Your love language might be different to your kids, but that's so refreshing to hear, Scott. So refreshing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about taking the edge off for a moment. Because, and it goes back to your other point earlier, which is literally that a lot of this shit's not going to matter when it's all said and done, depending on what you believe in, right? Like when you look forward, 40, 50 years from now for both of us, I mean, whatever, I'm going to just play that we're the same age. How old do you think I am?
I'm going to say you're late 20s, 28.
25.
25.
Well, listen, so we're both 25. And
oh yeah, I haven't been 25 in a while, but yeah, I'll be 25. It's all good.
We're both 25 for about the next, imagine, right, when we have probably 60 years, 70 years, whatever. When it's all said and done, you start asking yourself these harder questions of like, what actually matters? What am I working towards? Who am I working towards? What impact do I want to leave with people? And I think a lot of times those are the questions that need to be answered earlier than later, aka this podcast was launched on that. But then to avoid the stress and to take the pressure off, how do you do that? You take me as someone who stays lax and cool, and obviously your industry has a lot of that in people's personalities naturally. But how do you take the edge off and just kind of live a better, I think it's healthier and better for people, but when you're do have moments of stress or what have you, how do you take the edge off and stay a little bit more lax?
I'm a pretty level-headed guy. I think I'm really easygoing until I'm not.
Yeah. Right.
but I I try to look at the big picture of things. I always have. I've always been a big picture person. Like I
Yeah.
always, and I realize, and when stress gets to me a lot, and one of the things that I did is I moved from New York City. I was in Manhattan for 27 years.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I moved about 5 years ago because I just said, this isn't the life that I want. You know what I mean? Like this
Sure.
stress, it's getting to me. I want to be able to spend time with my children. And I spend so much time on a plane. I'd rather just travel to New York when I need to be there and come home to a place that I feel like I'm in a resort. You know what I mean? Like I come to a
Yeah.
home to a place and I feel like I can exhale while I'm
Mhm.
here. And I'll tell you, everybody has stress, right? We all have stress. And I will tell you, meditation will take the world's stress away if we allow ourselves to do it.
Mm,
I don't meditate as often as I wish I could,
sure.
but I will tell you, every time I do it, and every time I get to that place,
Mm,
it is the best decompression that there is. And also, I think we also find ourselves. I know this is a conversation, so I'll shut up at some point.
oh my
But
God, dude, this is
I
your
also
episode. Let me remind you, this is
thanks,
your
man.
episode. You talk
Thank
as
you.
much as you want.
The other thing, I think we create these habits for ourselves and tell ourselves that that it's de-stressing us. Alcohol was a big thing for me. I would kick back a bottle of tequila and be like, oh, I'm so stressed, I need the tequila to calm down, not realizing that it's actually creating more stress.
Hmm.
And that's the issue, right? I quit drinking about 5 years ago, and I have to tell you, I do not miss it. I do not miss that
Good for you, man.
idea of sitting, even if it's a bottle of wine, like sitting down with a glass of wine, that it takes a toll. And when I'm 50, right, I'm double your age. And at 50 years old, I wouldn't be able to drink like I used to drink, particularly at 25. So it has a toll on your health, has a toll on your mental health. It takes a toll on your heart and on your blood pressure and all the other stuff that it goes along with. And if you keep telling yourself that, another drink is just going to calm me down, it's going to be okay,
Mm,
it's actually making it worse, right? You're making the problem worse. And
yeah.
that's just life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Coffee, the same type of thing. I was an 18 espresso a day guy. I would just be in the restaurants, double espresso, start the morning with a quad just to get
Yeah. I
that
get it.
energy and get going. And then I realized one day, like, this isn't good for my stomach. I can't, like, this acidity isn't good. So I decided to stop. What I realized was the amount of stress that I had and the anxiety that I was carrying was
Yeah.
actually from the coffee. I thought that I was waking myself up and being more motivated, but then at the end of the night, the wheels are spinning. I can't sleep. I wake up and I'm stressed out all the time, and it's all because of the caffeine that I was consuming.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that managing these things, I think we're a society of, you see, it's like pork belly with fried eggs on top of a
As
hamburger with
good as it
mayonnaise.
sounds,
You're eating
right?
this. It's and we're this society of like abundance, right? But at a certain point, it really isn't about abundance. It's
Mm,
actually about it's about allowing yourself to experience things a little bit better, and just being a little more mindful of the things that we're not just consuming, but what we're surrounding ourselves with.
mm. You bring up so many good points. Like what you put in your body. First of all, I remember there was a lot of times where there would be acid in my stomach and it was always from caffeine. And I'd be like, oh my God, I have to take a fucking
Yeah,
probiotic now just to like deflate some of that acidity. But then the alcohol point is so true as well, because how
yeah,
many of us like result to not just alcohol? I mean, people are on drugs, people are taking supplements, people are, the CBD metrics and stuff. Like we can talk about it all day,
yeah,
but I feel like that's these escape mechanisms, or even I guess the counter to that is if you're feeling tired, right, or fatigued or whatever, it's like, oh, caffeine's going to keep me up. But if you
yeah,
don't look big picture, like you'd mentioned earlier, it is that big picture of your health and your longevity, if you may. Right. If you want to live a longer, healthier lifestyle, sometimes you got to cut back a lot of what you said too, which is literally sometimes too much is too
yeah.
much.
Sometimes more often than not, too much is too much. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I think that, this idea of, I learned a long time ago that, the idea of you got to eat three meals a day, eat 3 meals a day, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In actuality, when I've cut back to about a meal and a half a day, and I feel better than I've ever felt. I
Wow.
eat within a 6 hour window, and I actually feel great. I
Hmm.
feel I've it's not even about weight loss, right? It's
Sure.
about feeling healthy. Yes, I've lost some weight. Yes, I've it's allowed me to have more energy and work out more often, and be in a better headspace.
Hmm.
Um, and I get stressed just like everybody else, right? Like I have money worries, and I've owned businesses, and I'm, scared about this and afraid of that, or, oh my God, this deal hasn't gone through like it was supposed to. How come, just asking those questions, and spinning the wheels for answers. But if I really just allow myself to stop,
Hmm.
like stop with the nonsense in my head, just fall into your heart and just really think about all the abundance that you already have, and
Hmm.
all the things you have to be grateful for. In the beginning of COVID, a friend of mine called me. He's like, "What are you going to do? It's crazy." I said, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be home. I'm going to be with my family. And I'm actually going to be full of gratitude for this opportunity to be present with my family, which I never have. I don't have to
Hmm.
travel. I don't have to go anywhere, right? We're just together." And that was, I think, that's the mindset that I was trying to get into. We can focus on the negative, or we can identify with the positive. And there are always positives inside these situations that we can pull from.
Hmm.
Always.
Scott, dude, Scott Conan, everybody. Dude, that's next level. Because if you think, I mean, you said it, we live in a world of abundance.
Yeah.
And people are almost obsessed with that, where it's like, I never have enough, or I might be here with my career, my life, and my family and stuff, but it's like, but I want more of that, I want more
Yeah. Yeah.
success, and da da da. But
Yeah.
you got to check back in with yourself, like you said. If you're meditating, right, sometimes it's a gratitude type meditation. That's the only kind I think I've ever done, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the moment where you hit roadblocks of like, gosh, I'm feeling tired and fatigued, I'm feeling stressed, there was a lot that happened in the last week, blah blah blah. And it's like, whoa whoa whoa, all right, close your eyes, sit down for 30 minutes, and just look at what you have.
Yeah.
And like you'd said, I think all of us are going to hit with different type of stressors, but it's how you act on those. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and think through very logically too. I think setting realistic expectations for yourself is something that doesn't happen a lot for people. It's like, that sounds right, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. Oh my God, lemon water? No, but like, try it, right? And then have an idea as to what it's actually going to do for you. Is it benefiting your life? Is it not? Similar to your restaurants, is it going to benefit the masses? Is it
Yeah.
not? You have to think through some of those things. And then there's a confidence level I wanted to ask you about. With that, I feel like as you're making logical decisions that are not acts of stress, you can be more confident in your choices, don't you think?
Yes. Sometimes the decisions that we make are dependent on other people's actions as well.
Mm,
Right. And that's one of the things that, you could be ultimately confident in your decision making abilities, and your just abilities overall, and what you add to what that decision making is ultimately going to be like, what that relationship is. But there's sometimes, more often than not, always somebody else on the other part of the equation that needs to uphold their end of the bargain. And
sure.
I feel
Yeah, of
like
course.
that sometimes is also what needs to be contemplated. Those
Mm,
need to be, you know, what you're going to bring to the table.
mm,
They don't know what you're going to bring to the table, but you also don't know what they're going to bring to the table. And that is an important conversation to be able to have with somebody when you're making a decision that's going to include them on the other
mm,
side of that, because you're creating a relationship, right? You're creating that. So right now, everything is great. On the other side of this, we're going to have to work towards whatever it is that we're building together,
yeah.
um, and making sure that that person is going to uphold their end of the bargain, and you have an open communication where it's not about a bruised ego. um,
Mm,
we had I'll tell you, I had a situation in a restaurant recently
yeah.
where we had a really wonderful young woman who's doing a job she's never done before, and my corporate chef, who's one of my business partners, called her and said, "Listen, there's a situation, and there's this and this. You need to be a little bit more organized. You need to do this a little bit better. You need to be a little more, a little more finesse, a little more precision. It would go a long way." And when I saw her, she was beside herself. I thought I was doing a good job. And, he told me this and he told me that, and he told me all these other things. And I said, wait a minute, have you ever done this job before? She said, no, I've never done this. And I said, you've never in your life, she's like 20. You've never done this, never done this. So I said, what makes you think that you're going to be 100% correct? And why wouldn't it be a situation where my chef would kind of see that you're going off a path and kind of set you straight and put you back on the right path again? Why is that? Why are you assuming that's a negative thing? You've never done this before. He's done this for 20 years. Don't you think that he can help you set this path straight? So a lot of times it's about us overthinking it, us getting in our own heads. Oh my God, he told me that I'm not doing something right, but it's okay. We're not judging you. We want this to be great. Does that make sense?
That's right.
Like, that's the thing. We have this tendency, and all of us do it, not just this one woman. We all do this. Where we get in our heads. I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
My mother recently needed a new home. So it fell on me that I need to buy my mother a house. And I was super stressed out about it, like another expense in my life. It looked 3 or 4 days. I was just like, I want to take care of my mother. I love my mother. Of course, I'm going to do anything I can for her. I'd buy her a $10 million house if I could afford it. But then instead of being stressed about it, I said, my mother's a wonderful woman, just a wonderful woman. She raised me wonderfully, and she's always been there to talk to, and I love her to death. And she lost my father about 7 years ago, and they were together their whole lives, right? They started dating when she was 14, and she's 78 now, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of looked at myself in that situation, and I said, she's a woman who deserves to be revered. Right? That's what she deserves. I think all our mothers deserve a certain level of reverence. You know what I mean? And I said to myself, I'm thinking about this the wrong way. I'm thinking about this as a burden, but in actuality, it is an honor to be able to do this for her. Right? I find myself in a situation where I can afford to do it. And I'm thinking about the negatives when I should be thinking about what an incredible blessing it is for me to be able to do this for the woman who raised me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that changed my perspective on so many things.
Yeah.
And I was able to look at her and say the same thing to her. She was like, I'm so sorry you have to do this. I'm saying, no. This is an honor. Like an honor for me to be able to do this for you. Like, I get all choked up and stuff because it matters. Like, those are the things that I think, we'll look back. I'm never going to regret that decision. I'll never regret that decision.
Not at all.
Taking care of my mother, making sure that she lives in a good place.
Yeah.
It's important.
I love that. Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. I did the same thing. My mom and I were, I was 16, and I had to go buy her a car and get her in an apartment and stuff like that. And this is exactly why I feel like we're the same age, dude. You could be 50, I'm 25, or vice versa. But it's like when you have a level of care for your mom, I've seen correct me, and probably to you too, I will do anything it takes to make sure she's safe and loved and taken care of. And that's just a mother's love. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people can say the same thing. You brought up those two examples. And the first one, I think, well, both of them are very much grounded in perspective. The first one I would feel is more about accepting unlike any other, you know what I mean? I think this, can you hear me here?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
You just broke up on me. Say again. You said the first thing you said, you broke up on me.
Okay. So if anything, I mean, listen, this is like what podcasting is about. If you're listening right now, I think the shirt just fucked up a little bit, but your first one was all about perspective on learning and growing. And that's so important because like right now we live in a time where people want to be very successful very quickly. No, you have to talk to the ones who've done it before, and you have to check in with yourself enough to know that you have a lot of growing to do, and that's part of the process. There's no race to any of this. And then your second example is perfect to a mother's love. Dude, I have one question for you before you go jump in that pool, dude. I'm so jealous. I can't get
Call me.
I'll be there with you. We'll send each other selfies of our water. Like, oh my God, it's too hot. This last question for you, man, I got to tee it up nicely, but as you've built such an extraordinary career for yourself, opened up 4 restaurants and you have more to come, you have an incredible,
huge platform. Everybody loves you. And you've gotten to a place now in your career where I feel like it's just so sustainable that you are going to build more. It's that you want more, right? We talked about the abundance factor. It's not that you want all this. It's that it's just happening because your purpose is huge. But what keeps you inspired daily, weekly, monthly? What's keeping you grounded and inspired to keep doing all this?
Well, I have an overall goal. I come from a very middle class place, and that's nothing wrong with that, right? My father was a machinist, a tool maker. My mother worked at a credit union. But what I didn't grow up with, I grew up with a lot of love, but I didn't grow up with financial freedom. And that freedom is something that I seek, right? I feel like I'm a pretty grounded individual.
Yeah.
But as I see myself in this grounded perspective, if I kind of see it in my mind's eye, within that, in that grounded aspect, there are a lot of what's in the ground. There's a lot of insects, right? And there's a lot of people that particularly in business that don't have the same alignment that maybe you and I have, right? So I want to be really careful of the insects that I surround myself with, right? These people. And if I can rise up and identify that freedom, that financial freedom, I feel like I'll be changing, the life of my children and the family and the generations that come after me. And that's really important to never lose sight of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I teed up that question for you to hit a hole in one, my friend. Nicely said with the whole rise up and that's a full circle moment, dude. I love when that happens on this podcast because it makes me, first of all, I don't have to go and like recap the whole podcast. If you're just tuning in at the midway point or if you speed it up during the 15 seconds and stuff, he just gave you all of it, all the podcast conversation in that answer. Scott Conant, thank you for trusting me with this conversation, buddy. And, to all the success I know you're going to have, all the endeavors that I know that are going to be created, right? Full circle moments and stuff are coming your way. I can always feel that with people that I talk to, but for ultimately saying yes to coming on the Men of the Hour, man.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.